Let's talk about what happens when adults split up. And excuse me, I apologize. I actually have kind of a cold, and I probably shouldn't have done this video, but here goes anyways. So what happens when adults decide they no longer want to be in a relationship and they have children together, right? Whether they're married or whether they're just together, it doesn't matter. In the West, it's very common for adults, couples to have children together and not necessarily be married. So in the East, that's unheard of, but that's the reality of our lives. So let's discuss what happens when adults decide that they no longer want to be together for whatever reason, but they have children together. Now, when you don't have children together, it's not a big deal because you literally can just go your separate ways and don't have to deal with your ex, and you're fine. But if you have children together, and particularly if they're younger children, which is usually the case, then you kind of are stuck co-parenting with them, right? If you're lucky, right? A lot of times, one parent or the other will basically bail out and the children are left without that parent. Sometimes, the parents feel that this is easier because then they don't have to deal with the ex. But actually, it's not always the case unless the parent is just a bad, negative, influence. Different story. But for the most part, it's in the best interest of the kids to co-parent together, right? And how do you do that in a healthy, respectful, spiritual, loving manner? Think about it. You obviously loved this person at one point in time enough to create a child, right? You obviously had dreams and you wanted to, you planned a life with this person. You were not planning. Nobody plans on splitting up when you start a relationship. You're not looking for the end game, right? So when you have a child with the person, you really are thinking this is going to be it. But for whatever reason, you end up separating and splitting up. Okay, fine. But it's not the child's fault, right? And this child hopefully came from a place of love, and the child should be celebrated regardless. So what I want to urge you single parents to do is, number one, stop bad-mouthing your spouse, okay? They're not the enemy. They have half the DNA in your child as we speak. So respect that, because in bad-mouthing the ex, the parent, you are basically criticizing half of the child, and that's how the child perceives it. So when you are sitting there and criticizing the other parent of your child, what you don't realize is that subconsciously that child is feeling criticized themselves because you are now criticizing half of who they are, right? So stop doing that. Number one, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing from a karma point of view, and it's not a good thing from a psychological point of view, because you are literally you're damaging your child's psyche, you're damaging your child's emotional well-being, you're affecting the child's self-esteem. So stop doing that. Grow up, be the adult, find adult friends to process your anger and your frustration with. Find a therapist to process in anger, or go to church or go to the mosque, pray about it. Don't use your child as your therapist. Don't, and again, I say this, being a single mom, I'm on great terms with my ex now, but that wasn't always the case. And I've been guilty of bad-mouthing my child, right? And I'm not speaking some textbook. I'm telling you what I've experienced. And I am telling you, I know firsthand the damage that it has done for my kids, how it's affected them. Now, thank God my kids have turned out to be good, balanced young men. But even then, I wonder, how it's going to impact their choices in relationships. So again, first thing, stop bad-mouthing your spouse, your ex, because you love them enough to create a child with them. And when you criticize them, you're creating half of who your child is. Number two, the least you can do is be respectful to the co-parent. Nobody is telling them to have a good relationship or be on best terms with them. I'm blessed where we've evolved into a healthy relationship. And that's really just because most of the credit, I have to tell you, goes to all the adults involved, right? My side of the family, his side of the family, his second wife, we all decided as adults that it was in the best interest of our children if we all respected and got along, because at the end of the day, we all wanted what was best for our kids, period, right? Because we saw the impact, that it was having on our boys. And so, we were the lucky ones. But honestly, why is it that we are the lucky ones and we are the rare ones where we actually get along? Shouldn't that be the norm? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could actually be on good terms with your child's parent, father, mother, whatever, with your ex? You clearly have gone your separate ways, right? Whether you've moved on with somebody else or not, it's irrelevant. Your time together has ended. But obviously not completely, because you do have a child together until they're adults. And you have to co-parent. It's in the best interest of the child to co-parent. That means you need to communicate. You need to talk to each other in a respectful manner about what is going on, with the child. I find examples in my personal life, but I also find examples in work, and it's not in the best interest of the child when the parents are not communicating with each other, when you don't know basic stuff about how the child is being raised. What is the child eating? Is the child sick? If the child is going back and forth between two homes, which is very normal, again, there has to be the regular communication, because, what was the child's week like? Did anything happen? Did they have any nightmares? Did they say anything? That conversation must happen so that there's continuity of care between the two households, and there is some form of uniformity for the child, because at the end of the day, children need structure, they need routine, and they need predictability. Kids, I don't care who they are, how old they are, routine, structure, and predictability. That's why it's important to maintain a certain routine. Make sure they wake up a certain time. Make sure they follow the same bedtime. If they're in two different homes, follow that to the best you can. Again, if they're going to, have certain activities that they do after school, or certain, ways that they do bedtime, make sure you follow that. Make sure you practice the same thing so that there's continuity and stability for your child. Because if it's okay to do things differently, but then make sure you're communicating and you're talking about it so that it's not that far off. But, don't make the mistake, please, because you're hurting, because you're angry, because you're frustrated. Don't make the mistake of lashing out and bad-mouthing the ex in front of your child. Be very, very careful of that, because you might think the child is asleep. You might think the child is in another room. Just, if you're even mindful enough of not doing it in front of them, which I hope you're not, don't do it. If they're even under the same roof, wait till they go to school. And then go talk to your friend, over tea or coffee or on the phone. Because again, it impacts them. It totally, completely impacts them. I see that in their behavior. Then they start acting out in school. Then there's bedwetting. Then there's depression. Then the minute they get older, there's cutting. They're experimenting with drugs and alcohol. They're getting promiscuous with sex. Why do you want to do that? Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to have kids who are going to do any of these negative things or feel that way, right? We all want healthy, happy kids. Well, we have a responsibility, and guess what? There is something we can do about it. So take responsibility, parents. Be the adult in this equation and agree to disagree with your ex in a respectful manner. You don't have to like the choices your ex has made or continues to make. You don't have to even agree on co-parenting, but you have to respect. You kind of have to agree on parenting, co-parenting, because it affects the kids. What you do on your personal time is your business. Nobody cares, right? And nobody's place to judge. But when it comes to the welfare of your kids, my humble request is stop poisoning, and literally it's poisoning. Stop poisoning your child against the other parent, you're not helping them. Simple. That's the bottom message of all of this. So anyways, thank you for sharing. Thank you for checking in. Thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. I apologize. I have a cold I'm coming down with. So I'm just a little stuffed and I'm having a hard time talking, but I still, felt strongly to speak about this, and I like to do videos. I like to do topics when I feel like there's something that needs to be said about a particular topic. And I feel that, I need to say something. And so hopefully it's received. Hopefully this is helpful. Again, if you have questions, inbox me. I'll be happy to respond. I usually respond pretty fast. And, as always, your intention in anything you do is super, super, super important, right? But grow up, be the adult, be the parent. And, at the end of the day, guys, this is just one lifetime. It's not that serious. And kids all grow up. So what they will realize before you know it, these little babies that are in your hands will be teenagers and will be grown adults, will be grown men and women. And before you know it, they will see black and white. They will see shades of gray. They will see their dad and their mom, you and your husband or ex-wife or ex-husband. They will see you for who you are. Even